Good evening, everyone. We have with us a speaker who flew in just this morning from Texas. I'm going to quickly introduce Todd Bensman, Middle East Forum Fellow who focuses on Islamism and immigration, specifically immigration to the U.S. border. A senior fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies and a longtime fellow of the Middle East Forum. You can catch him either on Fox News, on Newsmax, writing. He's a 23-year career as a journalist and a 10-year career recovering from journalism, working for the Texas Department of Public Safety. And most recently, or more recently, he will be testifying on the Hill on Thursday. Todd, we're really happy that you're here to join us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate being here. I'm always honored to be affiliated with MEF. Proud to write and be published by them, and hope that we can continue that going into the future. Was very happy to be able to have an opportunity to come visit and see the conference here. I was going to be in DC, and I would realize that there was an opportunity. I work for the Center for Immigration Studies. That's my employer here in Washington, DC, but I live in Texas. My, I guess, area of specialty for years and years is the nexus between immigration and national security, particularly Islamist infiltration over the border. That's kind of my thing. A few years ago, 2021, I wrote a book called America's Covert Border War, the untold story of jihadist infiltration over that border. And the book was really a revelation of U.S. counterterrorism programs that had never been reported about that are down at the border that we use for 20 years. We've used for 20 years to keep the country safe from people coming across the border from 35 to 40 Muslim majority countries. The book reveals these programs, but it also said that, concludes that the actual threat of that was low, maybe to moderate. Not a huge threat, because we did pretty well. Those programs did pretty well. When we had 3,000 or 4,000 immigrants crossing the border from countries of national security interest, which would be the nations of the Middle East and the Muslim majority nations of Eurasia and North Africa, for example. 3,000-4,000 a year, and every year we'd have, maybe somewhere south of 10 who were actually on the FBI watch list that we would catch. And part of what we would do then is we would bring the FBI or the DIA or the CIA down into the detention centers and really hammer them with interrogation and interview to try to figure out who they really are, what they're about, check their pocket trash. Major program. When I worked for the Texas Department of Public Safety for those 10 years, that's what my unit did. We participated in this whole counterterrorism infrastructure that was in place down there. And we would wring all we could from these immigrants, and then we would deport them somewhere. We would always deport them out of the country. But today, I'm actually scared of what's going on. The low to moderate threat that I was predicting and talking about in my book is absolutely exploded beyond belief. I am worried and concerned right now more than I ever have been, and it's not just me. The Department of Homeland Security puts out every year, or actually they missed the last couple of years, but they put one out for 2024, a public unclassified version. And that 2024 threat assessment specifically points to the border as a major, critical, major avenue for Islamic terror attack in the U.S. That's the current one for 2024. A month or two ago, the FBI director, Chris Wray, went to, I think it was the Senate Select Committee, I forget which one of the Senate committees, and said, I am extremely fearful about the border situation. So many different kinds of threats are coming through the border, criminal and terrorism threats coming through the border. And then he named ISIS as a facilitating terrorist organization in Latin America that was working. This is Christopher Wray, not crazy Todd Bensman writing a book. It's DHS, it's Chris Wray, and it's a whole lot more. So one thing that you should know before we go any further is that we are in the midst of the greatest mass migration crisis in American history. By the metrics, we have never had the numbers that are crossing over the last 3 years than are crossing now. At least 10 million in 36 months. Most of them got in and they're staying in. They're not leaving, we're not deporting them. We are just simply taking almost everybody who comes to the border. So word of this, of course, spreads. This is all policy driven. We let people enter and stay by choice. And we make an affirmative choice not to deport people or detain people. So everybody's got a cell phone. Selfies, man. They are all sending selfies back, and villages across the globe are emptying out, coming this way. The percentage of people crossing that southern border right now who are not Mexican or Central American is plus 45%. Almost half of everybody reaching that border. This is not your grandparents, the Mexicans are coming to pick lettuce kind of a thing. We are seeing people coming into this country from 170 different countries, including all nations that we would regard as Muslim majority nations, all of them. I spend probably the last 3 years down on the border, usually on the Mexican side and in Central America. I don't spend a whole lot of time on our side anymore. I'm with the immigrants. And I've interviewed hundreds, thousands from those countries. I've met them from every nation just about, including my favorite one, Dagestan, which I had to look up. I couldn't remember, like, you're from where? You're from Dagestan? Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, everywhere. Name a country, they're coming across. The percentage coming from all of those countries, again, is the highest in U.S. history. We have never seen this level of international immigrants coming across. Greg mentioned I was going to testify on Thursday. That one's just about the Chinese coming in. 50,000 Chinese crossed that border in 36 months. Way more than anything we've ever seen. We're looking at about 300,000 a month in one way or another crossing that border, a mid-level city every single month for years. It's all policy driven because of these affirmative decisions to let them in and let them stay. That's the policy, period, brand new. What was that? I have 2 minutes left? Okay. What I want to say then in my 2 minutes is, because I was just kind of setting the table, but you, okay, is that we have seen 340 of these immigrants apprehended who are actually on the FBI's terrorism watch list. Remember, I told you that when I was in Intel, we might get 3, 4, or 10, and that was on both sides in any given year. We're getting dozens and dozens a month who are on that, and those are the ones we catch. The bigger problem, I mean, that's a petri dish, that's a test tube of the pool that's coming through that. Those are the ones we caught, are the ones that we accidentally released. I've got like 10 of those things counted. We're in such a crush down there that Border Patrol, they run a check and then they just forget to detain the guy. He flags on the FBI terror watch list. And then we're doing these crazy interior manhunts to track them down before they kill people. Now, we haven't had one yet, but I just wrote a piece yesterday for the New York Post, you can go look it up, about a breach of a military base 35 miles from here by a Jordanian who crossed that border and another illegal immigrant who illegally crossed the border in a truck, tried to talk their way in as Amazon delivery men. When they got pulled over for secondary inspection, they gunned it and tried to bust through into the base. That is if that's true, that would be the first border crossing terror attempt, but they're all mum about it right now. We're in an election year. These cases of accidental releases are ubiquitous by comparison with anything that's ever happened before, because everybody is busy down there. They're swamped. They're overrun. They're completely overrun. So there are mistakes being made. All of those counterterrorism programs that I talk about in the book, the interviews, the FBI, none of that's happening. Last year we had 100,000, not 4,000 a year, 100,000 from those countries crossed into this country, and we let them right through. We wave them right through. There's almost no vetting. They'll run them through database checks, and if they don't have a record inside the U.S., what are you going to do? Go to the Taliban and ask for an intel share? Not happening. Going to go to Assad and ask him for an intel share on his Syrians coming through? You're going to go to the Venezuelan Maduro and ask him for an intel share on all his Lebanese terrorists that are crossing our border? Not happening. So don't believe anything that's coming out of the Biden DHS right now about how well vetted everybody is. No, they're not. None of them are vetted. They're pouring through. I've met them all, Mauritanians, Senegalese, you name a country from any of those places, they're coming through. With that, I can just open it to some questions here.
Could you tell us what the Biden administration's agenda plan? Why are they doing this?
Why are they doing this, she asks. I get that all the time. So there's a couple of reasons. One is that the Biden administration needed its progressive left wing of the Democratic coalition in order to rise above the 15 candidates in the primary. Remember all those candidates in the primary? Well, the people who occupy that territory believe that immigration enforcement is immoral, evil, cruel, and it violates inalienable human rights and are to be ignored. The administration needed them, and for their reward, he has placed them in the Domestic Policy Council, in DHS, political appointees, the White House. They're running the whole immigration program, and they're putting this in. They basically let the inmates out of the asylum that they were all chained up down there. And the NGOs, they're all coming from NGOs from that, and they are gaining billions and billions of dollars in contracts and grants to manage what they wrought. Yes, sir.
The French author Renaud Camus came up with the idea of the great replacement. Conventional wisdom holds this to be a conspiracy theory. Do you think it's a conspiracy theory, or do you think it's what's behind all this?
I don't buy into the replacement theory myself. I've seen UN documents that talk about replacing declining birth rates and to fill unemployment gaps, that kind of replacement, maybe. In the United States, my view is that, we're usually pretty good at, better than Europe, certainly, at absorbing diversity. But the short answer is I'm not a big proponent of that one.
Who provides the money for these people to get here? That guy from Mauritania didn't walk. Even the ones we see pictures right at the border, did they walk from Guatemala? Where they fit?
I always ask, where are you getting the money for this? Because it's a fortune to come here. But you're not going to gamble your money. You're not laying your money down unless you have a high probability of getting in and staying in. So I always ask that question, where'd you get it? And then usually the answer is from my relatives that are already in the U.S. They're sending me the money. Or my uncle sold a plot of land. And I borrowed the money from a bunch of friends, and I have to pay them back with interest.
Yeah, I get all that. But
Bill, if we can get to another question, sorry, I'm out of time. Richard is going to be our last question.
Thank you, Greg. Todd, thanks very much for joining us this evening. Much appreciated. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of background for the benefit of folks in the room that potentially some Islamist terrorists or potential terrorists are actually coming from Latin America in countries where they have lived for some period of time. Maybe that's something that people aren't that aware of.
We've seen them. They're definitely coming. Mainly Lebanese Venezuelans. We see a lot of them. One of them crossed about 2 years ago from Matamoros to Brownsville. He flagged immediately on all the lists. They put him in detention. The FBI interviewed him. And then somebody from ICE headquarters ordered him released against the FBI's recommendations on grounds that he could get sick from COVID. Now, that's a true story. I have the documents. The records were all leaked. And that guy's running around in the Dearborn area pursuing an asylum claim. So, yeah. And we also have had Hez come through recently, including one who, as soon as he got across, said, okay, I'm going to tell you all the stuff. And he did. And I guess he was thinking he could cut a deal for him to stay if he turned on Hez and, said, gave him up. So.
Todd, can you briefly give the website for your work with the Terrorist Screening Center at CIS, the database?
Yeah, so you can wait for the...
Just for the CIS, and then they can click
Oh,
on the
yeah.
front page.
So, yeah, you can read my work, and you can see we put a database up of national security vetting failures. There's about 50 of them up there. It's terrible. Lots of failures when it comes to Islamics coming in on legal visas. CIS.org. And you can read all my work on that and much more at toddbensman.com. I write for a bunch of different publications. Most recently, I've been writing about the Columbia Journalism School putting up a big memorial to fallen Gazan journalists who are, half of them are on working for U.S. designated terrorist organizations. I wrote 2 pieces on that and an op-ed piece recently on Biden's plan to bring in Gazans under the headline, Hard Hell No. So, all right. I'll be around.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks, everybody. Todd is going to be joining us for dinner, so if you'd like to speak with him, we'll have at least another few hours. And if you don't have the opportunity, make sure you watch his testimony on Thursday. We have 10 more minutes for the bar to be open. And then at 7 o'clock, we're going to make our way over to the Paris Ballroom. So at 7 p.m., we'll make our way over to the Paris Ballroom. Thank you, everyone.